Before moving forward with the orientation, does anyone have any questions? No? All right. Some of you already I've taught, and some of you are new. And let me just, for those that are new, let me just give my introduction once again. So my name is Dr. Ankush Sharma. I've done my PhD in international relations from South Asian University. And I've been All India Rank 3, UGC NET, International Relations. Further, I've qualified for NET Political Science. I've been a former assistant professor of political science, including in Delhi University, where I was a lecturer, later assistant professor. And I've been teaching polity, international relations, as far as general studies is concerned. And I also teach political science and international relations as a UPSC optional. As far as today's orientation is concerned, it would be similar as to the one that we had earlier. The only difference would be is hopefully the students. As how we would start the orientation is we'll talk about the syllabus of what is the syllabus for political science and international relations. The second part of this is how it would help you for your general studies. And the third part is what you can expect in the classes. That is with me. And these are the three things we'll cover in this orientation. Let me first talk about the syllabus. As far as the PSIR syllabus is concerned, you have what is known as Section A of Paper 1. Section A of Paper 1. This basically consists of political theory itself. So you would have political theory, theories of states, ideas of justice, equality and rights, democracy, power. Within this, you also have Indian political thought, the thought of Mahatma Gandhi, the thought of Sir Syed Ahmed Khan and others, and Western political thought, which would include Lasky to the extent of liberalism, Karl Marx, and other various political thinkers. Within this, some basic idea of justice, equality, rights, Mahatma Gandhi, ideas of power you already would have gotten in general studies. So if you've reached here in general studies, you'll take one step ahead within political science. It does actually become easier. So the presumption is if it's like a ladder, if this is GS, political science would be one step ahead. So it's easier to take one step down and prepare for GS. So what is going to happen once you have prepared for political science? It means that you have already prepared for certain aspects of general studies itself, where the paper is overlapping. Technically, when we talk about the UPSC exam itself, it was initially actually a political science exam. When UPSC started, and this I'm talking about the 1950s and 60s, the Civil Services Examination was actually a political science exam. Later, then you had the concept of general studies and the way that we conduct the exam today. That is why 70% of the syllabus of GS is completely overlapping with political science. In terms of all the optionals, this is the only optional subject which has the highest level of overlap. That is 70% within general studies itself. Within this, it's not just that there is only overlap with polity and IR. There is also overlap with other subjects, including philosophy. So questions of, if you see here, political ideologies, which includes liberalism, Marxism, and others. If you look at GS paper 1, political philosophies is there in your syllabus, which says capitalism, communism. Mahatma Gandhi is also there in GS paper 4. Questions on Rao's theory of justice has also been asked in paper 4. And that you'll also study in justice. So there is a huge overlap, which we'll talk about going forward in the orientation. If you see within paper 1, section B, what you have is IGP, Indian Government and Politics. Within this, you would have India's freedom struggle and perspectives of Indian national movement. Lakshman will share that at the end. It would not be a problem. India's freedom struggle and perspectives on Indian national movement, which you actually do study in GS paper 1. So it's just one step ahead. Within this, if you see this part of the syllabus, making of the Indian Constitution, union government, legislature, state government, high courts, grassroots democracy, federalism, all of this is also there in GS paper 2, which is in polity. If you get to the second part of the syllabus, so this would be paper 2, section 1. Comparative politics. What happens here is within paper 1, you learn theories like liberalism and communism. What this does is how you compare them. There are various theories of comparative sense, but the core part of this is when you talk about comparative political theory or comparative politics, the political theory you'll anyways learn in paper 1 itself. And what you're going to do here is learn it in a comparative sense. How does communism consider socialism? How does liberalism come up with Fabian socialism? What is the difference between them? How do they perceive power? How do they perceive representation? How do they perceive justice? So all of that would become interrelated. The next part of this is, if you see globalization, this is there in your GS papers also. Within this, you have approaches to the study of IA and United Nations, regionalization, contemporary global concerns, which includes terrorism, climate change, and other things. This again is taught in GS paper 2 within IA. But this part is actually theories of realism, theories of liberalism, feminism. What would happen is within paper 2, section B, you're going to learn actual international relations. So India's relationship with the South Asian countries like Pakistan, India's relationship with global centers of power like the US, China, and others, India and the UN system, India's nuclear diplomacy, and India's foreign policy. And using theories, you'll understand IA better. So this is completely GS paper 2. All of this you'll learn in GS paper 2. India's nuclear policy was those that I've taught IA, you've already, there's nothing much different. The difference would be, how does India's nuclear policy fall under the prism of realism? Is it realistic in nature? Is it pragmatic in nature? Is it idealistic in nature? So theory would help you understand Indian foreign policy a lot better. Within this, India's foreign policy, you learn about Vasudev Kutumbakam, which you have done for GS paper 2. But is it realistic? Is it pragmatic? Is it idealistic in nature? By learning theories, you'll understand Indian foreign policy better. And same thing happens here. By learning theories, you'll understand Indian polity a lot better. And that is why political science was the actual exam on which civil service examination was conducted. If you look at the syllabus even today, a large portion of this is completely overlapping, 70% of it with GS. One of the problems that students have is the presumption that the PSR syllabus is vast. It's way too long, it's too much. There are two replies to this. One is it would also be done in 6.5 months. So if you take any other social science subject, whether it's sociology, whether it's public administration, geography, all of them are also done in 6.5 months. If the syllabus was vast, it would take about 9 months. But that is not the case. It takes the right amount of time to cover the syllabus. You asked my previous batch, they also started in July, 28th of July. In last week of February, the batch ended. All the syllabus, every part of it completed. So your batch, if you do take admission, 26th of July, your batch would also end by last week of February. The second part of this is the syllabus vast? No, the syllabus is not vast. First, the time taken is same as compared to every other social science subject. The second part of this, when you actually look at the syllabus of PSI, the way that it is given by UPSC, there is a lot of repetition. When we talk about liberalism in terms of political ideologies, there is no liberalism without understanding of Locke, Mill. So you would learn Locke and Mill, which are given in Western political thought, and your liberalism part would be done also. There is no Marxism without the ideas of Karl Marx and of Gramsci. I'm not going to teach them separately. When I'm teaching Marxism, I'll be teaching Karl Marx. When I'm teaching Marxism, I would be teaching Gramsci. So what is happening within the PSI syllabus is there is a lot of repetition. When you're learning Gandhiism, there's no Gandhiism without Mahatma Gandhi, which is given in Indian political thought. So when I'm teaching Gandhiism or Mahatma Gandhi, I'm teaching them together. But in the syllabus, they're provided as two different ideas. One in political ideologies, one in Indian political thought. But technically, when we study them in class, we'll be doing them within 4 classes only and simultaneously. So this is one of the problems that you find within the way that UPSC has framed the PSI syllabus. Within this also, you have globalization mentioned 3 times within the syllabus. Paper 2, section A, paper 2, section A, paper 2, section A. But we're not going to study globalization in 3 different ways. What we're going to do is take 4 days and study complete globalization, also from the GS perspective. It's not going to be done 3 different ways in that sense, in the way that the syllabus has classified. Conceptually, you're getting? It's just one topic, globalization. What you have done is mention it 3 times. Within this, again, social movement mentioned twice. Once in paper 1, section B, the other time paper 2 in section A. Same thing happens, political parties mentioned twice, pressure groups mentioned twice. And political parties and pressure groups are also there in your GS paper 2. Right? You study political parties and pressure groups specifically given within GS paper 2. So all 3, from the perspective of GS, from the perspective of paper 1, from the perspective of paper 2, would be done simultaneously. It's not like we'll be doing it separately. So what is happening is, again, theories of state in comparative sense. What are you trying to compare? The neoliberal idea of state with the Marxist idea of state. So it's not going to be done differently. So what is happening with the PSI syllabus is repetition. And because of repetition, when you open up the syllabus, it seems okay, it's way too long as compared to the PubMed syllabus or other syllabus, which is not true. It takes completely 6.5 months, and it has a huge overlap with GS. You're going to be anyways learning political parties and pressure groups for GS. So let's say it becomes easy. Here you're learning political parties, and in PSR also, you're learning political parties and pressure groups. It becomes easy to step down because you'll have information here in PSIR. GS would require it here, but it's always easy to step down. The other reason that it helps is between prelims and mains examination, you're given 3 to 4 months. If the syllabus is overlapping, you can do both of them together. Prepare for PSIR, your GS would be done. If you're preparing for PSIR IR, your GS paper 2 IR would be done, international relations. If you're preparing for polity PSIR, your polity in GS paper 2 would be done. If you're preparing for political philosophies within PSIR, political science, then your political philosophies in GS paper 1 would also be done. So that time between prelims and mains examination can be utilized much more effectively. You won't have to study different topics altogether. So it's technically by picking other options, your syllabus becomes vast. Because then you're learning 2 different subjects separately. But here you're learning them together. You talk about the contemporary global concerns. Democracy, human rights, environment. Environment is also there in GS paper. Similarly, within paper 1, section B, and paper 2, section A, environment, human rights, democracy. All of this is repeated. But this is also there within your GS paper. You'll be learning environment for prelims. You're learning for GS paper 3, but you'll also be learning from PSIR. So it does become easier in that sense. Similarly, the UN is there in paper 2, section A, and UN in paper 2, section B. But UN, you've also studied from GS perspective. UN Security Council, UN General Assembly, UN Peacekeeping Forces. Same thing happens here. The difference lies in answer writing. That is why answer writing is very important, which we do put a lot of focus within the classes, which we'll talk about moving forward in the orientation. This part is clear, that the syllabus is not vast. The time taken would be same as every other optional subject. Secondly, it would really help with GS itself. So if you see the overlap with GS, I'm not going to take a very long time, right? We're done quickly with this. I know you've been attending orientation from morning. If you see India's freedom struggle in paper 1, section B, perspectives of Indian national movement, political ideologies, globalization, caste, religion, and ethnicity in Indian politics. Vaishnavi, this one. You have a question for this slide? The slides I'll share within the group. It's not a problem. I'll share it in the chat group. If you see GS paper 1, which also talks about India's freedom struggle, perspective of Indian national movement, it talks about political ideologies like communism, capitalism, socialism. This is directly taken from your syllabus. No word has been changed here. Effects of globalization on Indian society. Globalization you'll also be studying. Caste, religion, ethnicity, social empowerment, communalism, regionalism, and secularism, which you'll also be studying in PSIR. So within this also, you have a huge overlap with GS paper 1. Yes, within PSIR, what is the primary topics? Polity and IR. So those are one level ahead of GS itself. But everywhere else, what you're going to find is that there is a strong sync between GS papers and PSIR. Like when you're studying for history within GS paper 1, which book do you refer to? I know most of you are referring to Spectrum, but the other book that is also famous is India's Struggle for Freedom by Bipin Chandra. If you look at the syllabus within PSIR, political strategies for India's freedom struggle, it talks about constitutionalism to mass satyagraha, non-cooperation movement, civil disobedience, militant and revolutionary movement, peasant and workers movement. You've studied this for prelims. You're studying this in history. The other thing with the overlap is that, yes, the syllabus is overlapping, but how does this help you? It means that your sources are also overlapping. If you pick up Spectrum, which most of you are using, or you pick up India's freedom struggle or any other book, these chapters are still the same. If you see non-cooperation movement, you'll be reading this chapter for GS also and PSI also. Your non-cooperation movement is there in your syllabus. Similarly, civil disobedience, revolutionary movements, peasant movements, Indian working class and national movement, and ideological dimensions, which is also within your syllabus. The Marxist perspective, socialist perspective, Dalit perspective, and humanist perspective. So the sources are also overlapping. It's not like you have to pick up 2 different books to learn the same thing. You pick one book, I would suggest then for PSIR, India's Struggle for Independence is much better. But even if you study from Spectrum, that is also helpful. But the sources are not different. For IR, what do you use to study? The Hindu paper. The same thing would be used for PSIR. It's not going to be any different. If you look at paper 1 of section B, which is Indian government and politics, making of the Indian Constitution, union government, legislature and Supreme Court, state government, legislature, high courts, grassroots democracies, which includes panchayats and municipalities, statutory institution, federalism, and party system. Same thing is there in your GS paper 2. Indian Constitution, federal structure, grassroots democracy, panchayats and municipalities, parliament, pressure groups, constitutional bodies, various judicial bodies, and other things. The syllabus is completely the same. I'm presuming you use Lakshmikant to study. Both of them can be done together. The difference lies is that when you answer within PSIR, you have to use theories and thinkers. But which thinkers? One of the most important thinkers that you use in political science is Dr. Ambedkar himself. What he said in the Constituent Assembly debates, which I anyways make you write within polity. Next is Cranwell Austin, which you also end up writing. So even in that cases, you find that the scholars that that you're using for polity are there also in PSIR. What happens is when we do paper 1 section B, this is the last topic I actually do. This will start around end of December or start of January. For one simple reason, because by that time you'll be giving your prelims examination or in prelims mode. So if I'm studying or teaching you union government, you can do the union government PYQs for prelims simultaneously. So what is going to happen is during the end months of your PSIR, your preparation for prelims would be simultaneously done because we'll be going through polity within the classes. Within the GS classes, I've already shared a 2000 question handout, which will do it here also. And when I teach PSIR, we're going to do PYQs. Not just of PSIR, we'll do PYQs of GS also. Because if there is an overlap, and I'm saying that it's beneficial to you, how does it benefit you in the class? So when we're doing, let's say, federalism, so we'll do all the PYQs of federalism that is there in prelims examination, that is there in GS, that is there in PSIR. If you have any doubt whether I do this or not, ask my previous students, because I've done this with all of them. You ask any of them, did we do PYQs? All of them were done, both for GS, prelims, and for PSIR. So what would happen is federalism would be done 3 ways. You still be preparing for your prelims examination. Your GS would also be there, and PSIR, obviously. The difference would always be in answer writing, which we'll do separately. Even within this, if you see the PYQs, so what source do you refer for IR? Manakni, for PSIR, I actually give handouts for IR, class notes, and I generally tell students, if you're preparing for current affairs, because most of the IR questions in PSI is just current affairs. So read the Hindu or the Indian Express. Whichever paper you find comfortable, read that. That would be much easy. The only difference is, let's say if a question is asked in GS and you're preparing from the Hindu, write the main points. But if you're preparing for PSIR, find out who wrote that article. So it may be Happy Man Jacob or Suhasini Heather or Happy Man, other people who end up writing like Rajiv Bhatia and others. Mention them. Rajiv Bhatia has said this. Happy Man Jacob has said this. Suhasini Heather has said this. So what you have done is brought in thinkers, and theories will do in class. That is why Harshpant, all of these, because these scholars you can actually cite or refer to within your PSI answer. So the source is still the same, which is the Hindu or the Indian Express. The notes making is still the same. The only difference would be now you write the name of the author also. That Swasni Heather has said this, Harshpant has said this, Happyman Jacob has said this. That is how it is going to be easier for you to prepare both for GS and for PSI. If you see the PYQs, it's not that first there is a syllabus overlap. The second part, there is a source overlap that you're using the same books and the same sources to prepare for GS and PSIR. The third is the questions also. If you see this question, this was asked in PSIR of 2023. Discuss the major provisions of the 74th Constitutional Amendment Act. Do you think it remains an unfulfilled dream? What is 74th? Municipalities. The states in India seem reluctant to empower urban local bodies, asked in 2023. So you're prepared for Panchayat, but you would be able to answer 2 different questions in GS and in PSI. It's actually quite common in UPSC examination that you would find the same exact questions within GS, paper 2, and in PSI. Exactly the same question being asked. Or it could be 1 year gap. They've asked this question this year in GS, next year they'll ask in PSI. Or this year they've asked in PSI, next year they'll ask in GS, which is quite common for UPSC. If you see 2022, this in GS, first one in political science. How far National Commission for Backward Classes is an empowered body? Assess the role of the rising demands for backwardness among the dominant community. Discuss the role of National Commission for Backward Classes in the wake of transformation from statutory to constitutional. The answer is going to be a little different, but the source is still the same. You're preparing for NCBC, National Commission for Backward Classes. You're going to about the Constitution. You're going to talk about the case that actually led. What was that case? Yeah, 102nd. Which case led to it? That there should be NCBC. It was in relation to OBC and reservation. It's the most famous case altogether. Right. No, the Mandal Commission was what is the case that is in relation to it? The Indra Swani case. So the Indra Swani case ended up saying that there should be a National Commission for backward classes. So initially they formed it as a statutory body. Later they turned it into a constitutional body. But in both the answers, same information. It's not going to be different. You're going to learn the 102nd Constitution Amendment Act. That is not going to be different. Yes, the way that you answer, because the question's perspective is different, but the preparation would be the same. Why did they ask this question both the year? Because it was related to current affairs. So during this particular period of time, Haryana had given reservation to Jat community. And the Supreme Court overturned it. They said that the Jats are not backward classes. They do not fulfill the criteria. Because it was current affairs, both in GS and political science, they ended up asking this question. That was the famous Ram Singh case. So you talk about the Indra Swani judgment, you talk about the Constitution, you talk about the Ram Singh case, the answer is still going to be the same for both the questions. There is no thinker here. Unless if you have read from the newspapers and of various thinkers that have written on this, that would be fine. But there's no special thinker that you would have to write here. Discuss the policy initiatives of the 14th Finance Commission. Recommendations of the 14th Finance Commission. This asked in 2022, this asked in 2021, which is quite common in PSIO. They'll ask the same questions, related, not exactly the same, in the same year or 1 year apart from each other. I'm not going to discuss all the questions. That we'll do in classes, but I just want to give you a perspective on how the overlap is there. If you see this, it's the same. If you see these questions, they have been asked in the year 2022, some of them in political science. NCBC you study anyways in GS. Basic structure of the Constitution you also study in the GS. Interstate Council you also study in GS. 73rd Constitution Amendment Act, which is Panchayats, you also study in GS. 14th Finance Commission you also study in GS. Speaker of the House of Lok Sabha, you also study in GS. Preamble of the Constitution, you also study in GS. So is there any question asked in 2022 which you would not have prepared for GS? Right? You would have prepared all of them for both prelims and for general studies. And you would have been able to answer them within PSI itself also. Yes, the perspectives are different. If you see the preamble question, it talks about in the form of a social contract, a theory that emerges from liberalism. So you have to bring in the ideas of Hobbes, you have to bring in the ideas of other liberal thinkers of social contract and link it to preamble, link it to American Constitution, because the preamble were borrowed from the American Constitution. All of this interrelations you'll be taught in class. How to link theory with current affairs, how to link theories with static subjects. Within section B, you have UN, world politics, Indian foreign policy, India and South Asian countries, Pakistan and others, global centers of powers like USA and China, India and the UN system, India's nuclear policy, recent developments in Indian foreign policy. And you look at GS paper 2. There's no part of this, if you see the PYQs, no part of the question that you would not have prepared for GS itself. These are questions of PSIO. Explain the major features of Indian foreign policy in the 21st century. What are they? You studied that for GS also. So you can talk about which policy? Strategic autonomy. You can talk about multi-alignment. You can talk about recently Vasudev Kutumbakam. So all of these policies that you learn in GS, you can also bring in PSI. The only difference, bring in theories. If you're bringing in Vasudev Kutumbakam, is it realistic in nature? Is it pragmatic in nature? Or is it idealistic? How does strategic autonomy work within the complete context of theories? France has strategic autonomy as part of their foreign policy. Bring that in terms of comparative nature. So that would make it much better for political science. What are the reasons for lack of regionness in South Asia? Yeah, Pakistan, that's one primary reason. But you'll understand this a lot better when we do in PSIR. You look at TRIPS, what are the ethnic conflicts and insurgencies that continue to become a problem in South Asia, which you have learned in security? What diplomatic steps have India taken to articulate the interests of the global South in international politics? And India and Russia relationship. All of this you have studied for GS also. The only difference is answer writing. The source is still the same, which is the Hindu or the Indian Express, class notes. But way that you write answers are going to be different because you do have to bring in theories and thinkers, which will do a lot more in classes. Discuss the importance role of UN peacekeeping operation as a ground for India's claim for a permanent seat in UNSC. Quad, India's nuclear policy, India's policy in Afghanistan, India-Iran relationship, external determinants of Indian foreign policy, West Asian Quad, which is I2U2, and India's interest within Africa. Now you tell me, are these questions of PSI or GS? GS or PSI? The reason I ask this question because it becomes difficult. You can have the exact same questions within GS and you can have the exact same questions in PSI and you would not know the difference. All right. So this question asked in PSI, West Asia Quad, which is I2U2. And I2U2 asked in GS paper 2022. So 1 year later. So West Asia Quad asked in 2023, I2U2 asked in GSN 2022. India's foreign policy in Africa 2021 and India's policy in Africa 2021. This one in PSI, first one in PSI and the second one in GS. Quad 2021 PSI. Quad same year 2021 GS. Exactly the same. Same thing that you find in polity, you'll find it IR. That, see, the point is when you're asking questions within international relations, it's a dynamic topic. So what happens internationally, it's going to be asked both in GS and in prelims and in PSI. They really can't make up current events. They have to ask the current events that have happened, which you're anyways preparing. And you're learning it from the Hindu and the Indian Express and from the class notes. So it does become easier. The sources are the same. The questions are similar. Secondly, the syllabus is overlapping. So the overlap exists in multiple scenarios. It would exist for syllabus. It would exist for sources. It would exist for PYQs or the questions that are asked. Any doubts up till now? All right. Again, I2U2 was completely in the Hindu paper. So both of them asked in 2022 and 2023. So from 2023, 2022, what you would find is that there were continuous articles within the Hindu on the topic, which does make it easier for you to prepare notes on this. Same thing, India-Iran, 2019, 2019. The Iran and the US, the Donald Trump putting sanctions on Iran, removing USA from the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action or the treaty that was signed with Iran, and what was the problem with India. So we continue to invest in the Chaba airport, which was allowed by the US, but we could not buy Iranian oil. So Iran was our first, I think the second largest importer, and it dropped below 10 because Donald Trump did not allow us. So both of them covered within the Hindu paper and asked in PSI. World Trade Organization and the problems of the trade wars asked in 2020, 2018, again covered in the Hindu. Same problem that was happening in the World Trade Organization, which was in terms of the trade wars, was asked in GS paper, and it was also asked in political science. The source is the same for preparing, which would be the Hindu or the Indian Express. You learned from class notes how to connect theory to this. So what would happen is when we talk about, let's say, the Iran issue, what would happen in this is you would bring in the ideas of complex interdependence, which is an IR theory. You would bring in the ideas of realism, which talks about conflict. You bring in two theories, one thinker, your answer is done. It won't be that much difficult. Same thing, India-Israel ties reflect the autonomy of India's foreign policy and India-Israel relationship 2018. This one in GS, this one in PSIR. What was the foreign policy that we had with Israel? The new foreign policy. No, we've done it in class. It was completely new that India did in 2017. It happened with the visit of Prime Minister Modi there. The dehyphenation policy. That we would not sue Israel and Palestine hyphenated. So the answer would for both the question would still be the same, where you have to talk about the dehyphenation policy. Then you talk about how India and Israel relationship have improved. We're working in water, agriculture, defense imports. Then you bring in a few thinkers that have talked about this, and then your answer for PSI would be done. The only difference would be in PSI, you write the thinker's name, and in GS, you don't write that name. But it becomes easier. Apart from this, if you see GS paper 3, there's certain overlap with GS paper 3 also. GS paper 2 is completely same, polity and IR to exactly is there. But if you see within GS paper 3, it talks about Indian economy. Now, planning and economic development is also there in PSIR. It's just a very small topic. It's not very big. Talks about land reforms and other things. But if you prepared for GS paper 3, it becomes easier to do it for PSIR. It talks about security, it talks about terrorism, nuclear proliferation, our regional disputes, like river water disputes, like we've done for Indus water, we've done for Brahmaputra. Insurgencies, ethnic conflicts, border disputes, like we have with China and with Pakistan, and India's nuclear policy. All of this in PSI, but you would also find this in security in GS paper 3. India's nuclear policy would be talked about there. Our border disputes have been talked about there. Our problems with insurgency within the Northeast, with Maoism, all of that has also been taught within GS paper 3. Further, if you look at GS paper 4, what is going to happen? You learn about Mahatma Gandhi's view and Dr. Ambedkar's view and M.N. Roy's view. Further, you're going to learn a lot of the Western thinkers, which you can use in your essay. Plus, within GS paper 4. Because if you see, it talks about contribution of moral thinkers and philosophers from India and the world. And Indian political thought and Western political thought, you're anyways going to study here. So it does become easier to answer those questions within GS paper 4. Further, it talks about ethical issues in international relations and funding, which you would be doing the idealist approach to IR. So even within GS paper 4, you'll find overlap with PSI. So whether it's GS paper 1 with history, society, whether it's GS paper 2 with polity and IR, GS paper 3 with economy and security, or paper 4 with thinkers, there is a huge overlap with PSI. That is why it said there is a 70% overlap, which includes in syllabus, it includes in the sources that you pick up to study, and it includes in the PYQs. Any doubts up till now? So hopefully I've made it easier for you to understand the overlap. So the first question is, why pick PSIR? So one thing is you're interested in the topics. If you really like IR, if you like polity, then it becomes easy that you're going to learn political science for 6.5 months, but you'll remain interested in the topic. If you're interested in society, go for sociology. If you're interested in human evolution, go for anthropology. If you're good with electrical engineering, that's All India rank 1 this year, then pick engineering. But if you're interested in international relations, if you're interested in polity, then PSI would make a better option. The second part is, if you're just looking for a subject to qualify, and interest is really not the goal here, then PSI does have 70% overlap. If you're from an engineering background and for you, all the social science is same, and the only thing that you're looking for is to qualify, then PSI is going to help you with that because it would have 70% overlap. Apart from this, although it should not be a reason for you to pick the subject, but PSIR has the 12% of the students that qualify are from PSIR, and which is the highest for any subject. It goes first, second, third, but generally within the top two, PSI would always be there. Sometimes geography also has 11%. PubAt, everything else is less than 10%, but 2% is not a very huge margin. So do not pick PSIR just because it has a high number of qualification. It has a high number of qualification, but it has the highest number of students also that prepare for it. So the competition is also quite high. So do not pick a subject because it's in vogue or too many students have qualified from that option last year. Don't take that as a reason. If you're good with the subject, you'll do well. If you're not good with the subject, you'll not do well. So interest, secondly, whether you're willing to do the hard work for that subject. Only those two things should matter. Abhishek, economics, actually, we don't have optional this year at Rouse. But if you're interested in economics, if you find that you're good in it, then pick economics. It's an excellent subject. It's going to have certain level of overlap with GS paper 3. But if you're good with it, pick that subject. If you're good with interested in human evolution, pick that subject. If you're good with engineering, pick that. Or good with management, then pick management. Apart, and the last part is what would you get from me? Abhishek, I think then you'll have to look at the UPSC report, but I think it should be around 5 or 6%. I think in the last UPSC report, they have provided the pass percentages. So the first part is you'll get the relevant knowledge about political science and IR, because that is why you're here. First of all, you're not going to become a PhD and you're not going to become a master of the subject. That is not my job. And if you want that, then you should have come to me when I was teaching at the university level. Then I would give you 3 years and make you an expert of the subject. But we have 6.5 months. The goal is 1, which is to qualify UPSC. After that, if you want to continue with the subject, learn it, that is fine. But the goal is to qualify UPSC. The goal is not to become an expert of the subject. And it's not going to happen. So don't get into that mindset in the first place. People said that PSI is only for student graduate from premium college. No, that is not there, Gulam. I have so many students. Even this year, I have 2 students. So I think those that I've taught in JS, or you've already met Hamza, but not from PSI background. Anilin is going to come in July. So he's also qualified this year, but he's also not from a political science background. Technically, and it's a problem also, 60% of the students that have qualified UPSC are from an engineering background. 60% of the students that have qualified UPSC are from engineering background. So UPSC has raised this as a concern that social science students are not qualifying, even though that the subjects that they have is completely overlapping with the UPSC syllabus. And I'll tell you why. When I was in Delhi University, students have to write an answer for 800 words or 1200 words. Here you have to write in 150 words or 250 words or 300 words, dependent upon the marks. So 10 marks, 15 marker, 20 marker. Engineers are good with that, which is to not learn that knowledge for a specific period of time, dump it on the paper, and move on with it. The other part of this is, if I want to make you write 1200 words, I can actually pick out who's an expert and who's not an expert. But in 150 words, it's not possible. Because in 150 words, everyone would seem like on the same page. Same thing happens with 300 words. The other part is social science students, which I've taught, and because you have more knowledge, you take more time to write the answer and you don't complete the paper. And that is in itself also a difficulty. So when we do answer writing in classes, I actually ask the students which background. Engineering, because that means your content is weak. So we'll focus more on content wise and then answer writing. But if you're from a social science background, so you do have a little bit of knowledge that is already available with political science. What we have to do is make it UPSC relevant in terms of answer writing. You get that knowledge concise in 150 words within 9 minutes, concise within 300 words within 9 minutes. That is why answer writing is so important. If you just want to get knowledge, then you ask me separately. I'll tell you the YouTube videos, the books to buy. You'll get that. That is actually not a problem. You can take my notes also, not a problem, and you could read from that, which students have done. But answer writing is where the students don't get marks because you don't complete the paper. And if you don't complete the paper, the likelihood of qualifying becomes very low. And the second part is you don't write it properly. You end up writing the answers in bullet points, which is not done in options. You have to write it in paragraphs. You can use bullet points in 1 or 2 answers, that too for the body, but you have to write in paragraphs. The second part is how to actually end up using thinkers and theories properly. You're not going to dump knowledge if it's not connected. If you're writing in Iran and USA, you're not going to bring in Thucydides trap and power transition theory because those are not fit for the answer. And that is where the students end up making a mistake because they don't understand the linkages between theory and current affairs. And that in itself is very important. So answer writing in itself is a lot more focus that we'll do in classes. Forum, see, I've taught political science. I've been a student of political science. So for me, political science is the best subject. But you have to pick which you are good with or comfortable with. If you're comfortable with history, pick history. If you like polity, if you like international relations, then pick PSIR. The second part is personalized attention. When it's a common word that everyone ends up using, but when I say personalized attention, it basically, if you have a doubt, then ask me on WhatsApp. You'll always get a reply quickly. And if you have a doubt on this, ask any of my former students. Not PSI, ask GS students. You ask any of them whether I reply to them on WhatsApp or not, whether I check their papers or not. You'll get a response for them, whether I do it or not. And that is what personalized attention would mean. That even after the batch is done, if you want to continue answer writing, then send me answers. If you have a doubt, send me that question. Continue to be in link, but it has to be from your side. It can't be from my side. I can't force you to write answers. You have my time, you write answers, and you'll always have my time to check. Effective answer writing. So that too is a special focus because after we've done each topic, let's say we've done Gandhi, we've done liberalism, we've done, let's say, power. After all of that, we'll discuss all the PYQs. So I'll give you an example. If you see this particular slide. So these are all the previous 5-year questions that have been asked in relation to amendment procedure in 2016, 2021, and 2013. We're going to discuss all of them. And when I say discuss, it's not like I'm going to tell you, okay, these questions have been asked. When I say discuss, how to answer them. If this one says Article 368 does not enable Parliament to alter the basic structure framework of the Constitution, how are you going to start the introduction? What are you going to write in the body? We'll have separate conclusion writing classes because I find students have a lot of problem with them. So we have separate classes, all part of your course. on how to write good conclusions. Because in GS, you write way forward. But there is no way forward on Mahatma Gandhi, no. There's no way forward on all of these ideas. So how do you then write a conclusion? So in some answers, there might be a way forward, but in some answers, the conclusion has to be written very differently. And that we'll do separately. Those are separate classes which we'll do continuously within your course, how to write good conclusions. And the only reason I do answer writing and focus more on this is, see, next year might be your first attempt. You may or may not qualify. You might qualify in your second or third attempt when you actually give PSIR. But if you've learned answer writing, you're not going to forget it. If you've done it in the 6.5 months properly, you're never going to forget it. If you come to me when you've qualified prelims and then say, I have 3 months left, sir, now teach me answer writing, it's not possible. In 3 months, you can't teach answer writing. So that's why it has to be done simultaneously with the course itself. You can do it after the class also. I've had students from weekend batches because they're working, they don't get this much time. So once the classes have ended, now they have started answer writing, which is fine. You continue to send me answer, it would not be a problem. But this is what I mean when we say we'll do answer writing, how to write proper introductions, how to write proper conclusions, and we'll do for all questions, how to do proper introduction for this question and this question and this question, how to do proper conclusions for these questions. So all the PYQs would be discussed in that manner. Apart from this, there would be regular class test. So initially, with every topic, we'll do it. I'll give you a question for you to write. So if done Mahatma Gandhi, I'll give you a question. You show it to me, I'll check it. And you'll have my personalized attention on how answer writing for you separately can be done better. Because everyone has their own way of writing. I'm not going to change that. My job would be to make it a lot better. And within this, after every section is done, so there are 4 sections. Paper 1, section A, section B. Paper 2, section A, section B. So after every section, you'll have a class test, which I don't check. So I have a friend who teaches in Mumbai University. He's the assistant professor there, political science. He was my junior when we were doing PhD. He checks the paper. Same thing happens for the current batch. You can ask them if it was done or not. So I send it to him because the point is you're my student. So I know where you are lacking and where you're good. But it's always better to get a outside perspective. And when you actually do write for UPSC, the people who check your paper are actually associate professor. So if you get a person from the academics background to check your exams, it does give that perspective of UPSC. So that would make it a lot helpful. And secondly, I'll also get feedback. So there is no bias from my perspective to individual students. Apart from this, there would also be a test series, which you can take continuously for 2 years. So you'll have it for your own batch. And for the next batch also, you can take the test series. It would not be a problem. But anyways, that really doesn't matter. If you want to continue with answer writing, just send me answers. It's not an issue. Apart from this, we'll focus extra on polity. So this would happen, I've already said, end of December, start of January, when we'll do paper 1, section B. We'll discuss all the polity PYQs, which we've done in GS. And you can, so if you're doing, let's say, union executive, do the questions of the prelims and mains and for PSIR, so that all the 3 topics can be done simultaneously, so that you don't have to take extra time out to prepare for your prelims examination. When your batch ends in February, think, go for economy, go for other subjects. And before we start, up till December, do the other subjects. But at least give that particular time, end of December, last week, plus January, for polity itself, so that we can do it properly. Apart from this, handouts would also be given. Let me show you one of the handouts itself. Where is it? I think some of you may have already seen this, but this is a handout for India and ASEAN. So it has complete basic information, map work, what is the current government of India policy, plus it should also have thinkers. So if you see here, to the end. What the MEA report says, what other thinkers have said on India-ASEAN relationship. Like what Harsh Pant has said, what Tommy Kaw has said, various other thinkers in relation to India and ASEAN. So all of these regularly handouts you'll also get in classes. Further, most of this would completely be dictated in class. So I'm going to dictate everything in class so that those notes you can refer to later. Again, the same reason. It may not be necessary you qualify prelims the first time. It may be the second or third time, but you can at least go back to the notes. The only problem lies with IR because it's dynamic. So for that, there would be handouts. What Dr. Jaishankar has said, Shiv Shankar Menon has said, Amitav Acharya has said on India-ASEAN relationship. So all of this you'll get as a handout. Let me share it in the chat also. Apart from this, this you already have. You'll have online access to the videos for 1 month. So if you're not able to watch a lecture, you'll have online access to all the videos for 1 month, which is the same as that is done for GS classes. And obviously, you'll have my continuous support after the classes are done. So you can continue to send me answers. You can continue to ask me doubts. And it's up to you to not lose touch with me. But it's completely up to you. And I've had students that have started answer writing now. The batch ended in February end. And from now onwards, they've actually started answer writing, but most of them are actually weekend batch students because they're working. So they ended up watching recorded lectures and they could not do answer writing at that time continuously. So they do it now. It's not a problem. And I've shared the ASEAN handout in the group chat also. You can take a look at it. So this is everything that you'll get from me. Is there anything that you want extra? It's not a problem. And you can tell me later also, it won't be an issue. But you would get that personalized attention, you would get that focus, and you would get knowledge of PSIR. See, PSIR for me, it's a personal subject because I teach it and I've been a student of it. But it really helps you understand the world better. By understanding polity, by understanding, let's say, political parties, when we do in PSIR, you'll understand something known as a one-party dominant system, which was there with the Congress, but we'll study it in a lot more in depth. You'll understand why the BJP is heading the way that it's heading. What is the reason for its success? Are USA and China going to go to war? So there are 3 different theories. There's a power transition theory, Thucydides trap. There's complex interdependence, which talk about different ways, whether they would go to war or when they would go to war. It's up to you to whether to accept them or reject them. So they're controversial in themselves, but it helps you understand the world a lot better. And one thing I do in class is the political science syllabus is a little more Western in orientation, but we'll connect it with our history. We'll connect it with our own roots so that you understand the justice that has been seen from Indian perspective. You understand the ideas of equality that is seen from the Indian perspective and from a larger current affairs also. It may not be exactly relevant to PSI, but it really does help you to understand your world better. Any doubts? Some law background, which option is better to take out of law? See, Vaishnavi, I actually, in Indraprasth College, and this is during my PhD years, 2017, I actually taught political science to the law students in Indraprasth University. You actually do read all the theories. So if you see political theories and you see IGP, you anyway study all of that in law. But again, it's completely your perspective. If you're more comfortable with law, then pick law. But I think if you're from a law background, you've also studied a complete paper 1 itself. The only thing you may not have studied is IR. There you might have studied international law, which is not there in the syllabus of PSI. So in Rouse, 2 batches for PSI or both batches are the same. Kulam, actually both batches are the same. One is from Delhi and I teach in Bangalore. And different teachers, different. There is no anything common between both the batches. It's just that one is offline within Delhi, one is offline within Bangalore, but both of them can be done online, but different faculties. So that Rahul Puri sir does, who is also very good, and here I teach. I'll teach the complete subject. I'll teach both paper 1 and paper 2. How long have you been associated with Rouse? And you will be taking GS class for upcoming June. Yes, Samriddhi, if you're there in the June batch, I don't know whether you're in Delhi, Bangalore, or online, but in Bangalore, I would be taking your polity and IR. And I've been with Rouse 2017. I left in between during COVID. I taught at university level, but I've been there. If you've seen DNS, Daily News Simplified, yeah, so I started that. Or I was part of the team that started that. Vaishnav, how can I attend your classes, or will there be weekend batches? No, Manigan, there is no weekend batch. The classes are from Monday to Friday and from 1 to 3:30. So it would be for 2.5 hours. As a working professional, I get the problem. I had working professionals in my earlier batches also. If you can come, that would be the best. If you can't come, if you're watching recorded lectures, Saturday and Sunday, if you're in Bangalore, you can come and meet me at any time. It's not a problem. And whenever you are free to take a call, then message me and we'll discuss. If you have any doubts over the call itself, you can send me answers later. It's not a problem. We'll try uh, on an individual level, we'll try to work around your and mine schedule itself. I'll renew. So Vaishnavi, that's one part. But if you like IR and GS, and anyways, you have to study that IR portion in GS. So everything would end up being the same itself. So you have a good command over GS paper 1, or sorry, PSI paper 1, both in political theory and in IGP. So that would be helpful. And IR, anyways, you have to study for GS. But at end of the day, it's your call. If you're comfortable with law, pick law. And if you like political science, then it would then pick up PSI. Can I get the detailed syllabus of PSI? A soft copy. I'll just share the PPT in the group itself. So I'm online, sir. Yes, daily. Vaibhav sir and Gaurav sir. All right. So share the PPT online. You can go through the syllabus there also. And anyways, we'll talk about the syllabus completely in classes. We'll go actually topic wise. So if you see the syllabus, the first part of your syllabus is actually political theory. And so we're going to start classes with political theory itself. And it starts with the first question. What is theory? And your study theory, if you're from engineering background or from management or from social science, everyone has studied theory. But what is the use of it? And why do we study it? So those ideas you'll get from PSIR. Why is it relevant to study theories? June morning batch. Kulam, I don't know whether I would be taking the online batches. That is not clear. But Bangalore, offline batches I'll take for everyone. But anyways, if you have a doubt, Kulam, even if you're not a PSI student, you can ask me. It's not a issue. All right. So This is my number. 9910330147 and my email ID. If you have any doubt, just send me a message on WhatsApp, and any doubt at all over PSIR, over GS, polity or IR also. Even if you're thinking not of taking PSIR, then if you have doubts in GS, it's not a problem. You can reach out to me, assuming that it's about polity or international relations, which I can help with. And any doubts? No doubts. If any of you want to leave, you can leave, because I'm just taking the questions that are off online. It's not a problem.
Sir, I have a doubt. I'm from an
Yes.
engineering background. So from your session, I get to see that there are a lot of overlap with respect to the general studies. So what you're trying to say is it more comfortable for an engineering student to take this subject, right?
Manikandan, actually, your voice is not coming clearly, so I didn't catch all of it. What you ended up saying.
Okay, am I audible now, sir?
Yeah, you're audible.
So what I'm asking is, I'm from an engineering background. So from your session, I get to see that PSIR has a lot of overlap with respect to general studies. So will it be more suitable? Because for me, all social science studies are almost same. Even sociology looks same, anthropology is looking same. Just looking for a subject which gives me a good marks and which has a good overlap. In that sense, PSIR is good only.
Hmm. Uh,
I'm asking, will it be okay? Because for me, all subjects are looking same.
See,
That's why.
in terms of other social science subject, PSI does have the highest overlap. That is one part of it. In terms of sources, questions, and in terms of syllabus. Assuming and considering that you're from engineering background, actually I'm also. I've done my graduation in mechanical, and there's a famous saying in India: first you become an engineer, and then you decide what you want to do in your life. So so I
Okay.
decided that what I want to do is teach. And if I was not teaching here, I would be teaching at the university level. And if I'm not teaching at university level, I would have been teaching in a school, but I would have been teaching, because that is what I enjoy. And I like political science, especially international relations. The presumption is, what do you actually end up having an interest in? If you like society, and then pick sociology. If you like international relations, if your idea is to become a Indian Foreign Service officer, if you like the ideas of polity, and if you find that this overlap is going to really help you with GS and prelims, then pick PSIR. If you like the ideas of human evolution, then pick anthropology. It really then goes down to what your core interest is. And if you like history, then pick history. But I can't really make that decision for you. And you have to end up taking that call, considering that the job that you're applying for, which is to become an IAS officer or one of the civil servants, you have to pick your optional, and you first understand that you have to stick it for 1 year. If you
Yeah.
start, let's say, PSI today, that means till the time you give your first mains, you have to continue with that optional subject. And after that, if you feel, okay, I don't like this subject, then you can change it. But it's a very strong decision to change your optional subject later on if you're not interested in it. Um, there is no easy answer to this. My suggestion would be, go through the PYQs, find which subject interests you. Have you done GS coaching?
No, sir. I'm starting right now.
Acha, okay. So what is going to happen once you start your GS coaching? You're going to be taught IR, you're going to be taught polity,
Hmm.
you're going to be taught society, you're going to be taught other subjects. You still have time because the batch is starting in 26th of July.
Hmm.
And so you can take your time, find out what interests you within GS, and then you can pick your optional subject. You don't have to take the call today. You can take the call on 25th of July. So once your batch of GS ends up starting, you would be taught IR and other subjects. Find out which you are much more interested in. You don't sleep throughout the classes. You like going back home and reading upon it, or you like to study that subject further and pick that subject. If it's society, pick sociology. If it's IR or polity, then pick PSR. If it's human evolution, then pick anthropology.
Okay. Okay, sir. Thank you.
Any other doubts from the students? There are no doubts? All right, so I'll close today's orientation and reach out. Send me a message on WhatsApp. It's not a problem. If you have any doubts and you want to talk on a personal level. All right, take care, everyone.